paradoxically, this moment of crisis is also one of great opportunity. And you know, I've been here quite often.
You mean to this table?
At this table. And excessive optimism is not my distinguishing trait.
No, it's not.
But
so there is excessive optimism now?
No, I don't think there's excessive optimism.
Okay, well, moderate optimism.
I think that when the new administration assesses the position in which it finds itself, it will see a huge crisis and terrible problems. But it can, I could see that it sees a glimmer in which it could construct an international system out of it. If you look back to the end of the Second World War, many people now think that the period between 1945 and 1950 was in many ways the most creative period or one of the most creative periods of American foreign policy. But it started with chaos and fear of Russian invasion of Europe and governments that were very weak and people who were very
So the United Nations came out of that, the Marshall Plan came out of that.
That's right, and NATO
came out of that, and later the Truman Doctrine came out of that later.
Right.
There is opportunity in the crisis because, yes. Repeat it for me, because?
I think because when you look at the medium-term interests and the long-term interests of the key players, India, China, Russia, America, Europe, they really are importantly parallel. That we should not look at this current situation from a posture of being paralyzed by the symptoms of crisis.
Fair enough. Within the crisis there is opportunity. But when you talk about a new structure, I'm not sure you've used the term new world order. I mean, what is it? Is it simply a world order that's defined by new interest and new mutuality of interest?
Well, that's certainly how you have to start. And I know the view that you start by converting the whole world to our political philosophy. I don't think that can be done in one or two terms of an administration. That's a historic process that has its own rhythm.
Has it suffered a setback, A, because of Iraq, and B, because of the economic crisis?
That's what suffered a setback.
The idea of America leading and building a whole new consensus for a kind of...
Look, there are so many problems in the world at this moment that can only be dealt with on a global basis. And that's unique. Proliferation.
Environment.
Environment.
In some cases, global health.
Right. So all of these issues necessitate a global approach. So you don't have to invent an international order. And so every country has to mitigate its pure national interest by the global necessities to some extent.
Or define its natural interest.
Or define its national
by
interest.
The global necessities.
But it cannot push its own technically selfish interests. In talking to the leaders of the world that I have met and counted in recent months, to what extent their willingness to cooperate with America has been enhanced by the very recent crises.
The economic crisis.
The economic crisis, and also the way the whole international system is evolving. And I'm not saying that leaders will be able to be up to all the opportunities that I may, as an outsider, may perceive. But I think they can start moving in that direction. And I'm actually fairly hopeful that we will be moving in that direction.
It seems to me the larger point you're making is that the economic crisis that is prevalent in the United States, in Europe, in Russia, and in China, India, offers an opportunity to make a case for something new rather than something old.
Yes, funnily enough, even the jihadist crisis is teaching everybody, it's bringing home to everybody that international affairs cannot be conducted entirely by drawing borders and then defining international politics by who crosses what borders with organized military force. This has now been reinforced by the fact that the financial crisis, which totally unexpectedly has spread around the world, limits the resources that each country has for a foreign policy geared to assertion of its own pure interests. So every country is obliged to set certain priorities, so that foreign policy now becomes an exercise into seeing whether the inevitable priorities that each country has to set for itself can be meshed in some manner to reinforce each other. Can it be done? I don't know that. It should be attempted, and I think there's a good chance of it.
What would you call this age, this opportunity, this moment?
It's a good question. I haven't condensed it into maybe the age of compatible interests.
Pretty good. Thank you. Good to see you again.
Great pleasure to be here.
Henry Kissinger, back from Russia. Many questions about Russia we didn't get to, the relative power of Medvedev and Putin and all of that in terms of Russia and its internal questions as well. But this evening, a look at how the world might be.